Welcome to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast. I'm Amy Shannon, but you can call me Amy. Thank you for listening. Hello and welcome, and I hope all is well with you. You should know that my heart is always with you. This is the third Sunday of the month, so that only means one thing, well, at least here, that is Poetry Corner. Today I will be sharing work from my poetry book called All of My Yesterdays. This, I have put together a lot of, three poetry collection books. This particular book means a lot more to me than the others because there's a story behind how I put it together, how I wrote. Because this is not just a book of poems, it's inspirations, what I had been inspired by while I was putting it together. In 2018, my father had to undergo triple bypass surgery, and he and when he survived. He is still alive, and he's in a memory care facility because he has progressive dementia. But when he was released from the hospital, they told me that the anesthesia, because of his traumatic brain injury, could affect his memory, and and that was something that we had to consider. But my dad and I were looking to save his life. My dad looked to me to help him make the decision. He once told me, he told me a couple times, that I was the smartest person he ever knew. And coming from my dad, who has a very high IQ, that was like one of the best things he could ever say to me. We had a rough relationship when I was growing up, but we made amends and had a great adult relationship, so much that he relied on me to help him out whenever I could. So I did that after his surgery, and he went to rehab for a while until he could go back to his apartment and be on his own. My father was also diabetic, and they had taken him off his medication, his pills that he took, and put him on insulin. My father did not know how to give himself insulin, so I went to his apartment every day for about 2 months to give him his insulin shot, and then eventually he was put back on his medication. One thing about, they talked about the anesthesia affecting his memory. I must say that this was a version of my father that was one of my favorite versions. If you think about it, every person has a version of themselves because we live, we change. We could be, we're someone's child, we're someone's parent, we're someone's friend, we're someone's relative in some way. We could just be an acquaintance, and depending on how you are with each other and how you are with different people, those are versions of yourselves. That's kind of how I look at it. My father was never one to open up about his childhood. He didn't share stories. He didn't share memories as a child. But during this 6 month, it was a 6 month period that I remember that when I would take him to his doctors for follow-ups, I used to take him to physical therapy twice a week. And instead of being his own quiet self, he told me stories that I had never heard before. And that was just, I was like, oh my God, this is the dad I always wanted. But life changes. He almost went back to baseline after a while. But back to my story of writing the poetry book called All of My Yesterdays. The title, to me, was inspired by Frank Sinatra's book, or Frank Sinatra's songs, All of My Tomorrows, and which is one of my favorite songs of his. But so I wanted to, I just kind of got inspired to write various poems, and this book was put together, inspired, while I was sitting in the waiting area for my father to get out of physical therapy. He had an hour appointment for physical therapy, so I would bring books to read, and I brought my notebook, and I would write, and then I would read. I was reading Shakespeare and listening to, with my earbuds, listening to Frank Sinatra, and who is one of my favorite musicians, singers, and I was just, I brought my Shakespeare, I brought my Whitman, and I would be inspired by their words and then write for them, or just write about what I was thinking. So I have selected a group of different poems from that book, it was written during my father's physical therapy sessions. So when I touch this book, when I read this book, and when I'm reminded of it, it reminds me of that time when I still had my dad with me. He now has a new version of himself where he doesn't know who people are, but he's at a stable baseline right now. So this book, which I had given a copy to my dad a long time ago, and he marked pages in it. My grandmother did the same thing. There was a few poems that she liked, and she would always reread them, and she said it made her feel close to me because my grandma was like my best friend. So I'm going to share some of my favorites with you. So the first one is Footprint. I was here, I was born, I grew up, I wrote. I gave life, I loved, I lost a lot. I was loved, I shared, I told stories. I provided safety. I learned, I shared, I taught, I ran, I walked, I survived. I left my footprint, I left my shadow, I left my soul. Now, my next poem that is one of my favorites is called Rise Up. The spirit moves within the soul, rising up, rising above, leaving behind that which brings you down. The pain, the anguish, dropping you to your knees, the tears that refuse to sprout because it hurts too much. The hard gulps, the searing stabs, the pulsing rumbles, dropping you to your knees. The spirit moves within your soul, rising up, rising above, leaving behind that which brings you down. Past crashing into present, reality crashing into dreams, heart pounding, bones cracking. The spirit moves within the soul, rising up, rising above, leaving behind that which brings you down. Inspire, aspire. So, my next one is my own version of Songs of Myself. Walt Whitman wrote several ideations of the Leaves of Grass. His first edition was in 1855. The collection of Whitman went beyond what was published, and there were many rejected, and yet are now part of a collection of a great innovator of writing. To be read even centuries later is a legacy beyond words, beyond what is known to the writer. The grace of words carry forward and blend, leaving sentiment of an age gone by, still resonate with the era in which it's read. The human condition, human emoting, the beauty of words joined together, sharing the thoughts of the thinker and the teller of stories. The magic of imagination, a legacy of words. Songs of myself. I only know how to be myself. I can only be me. I feel inside my heart, and yet it's what I hide. I only think of dreams, and all the time, and it flows like rough streams. I only see what I see inside myself, and see myself as me. I can only be many to all, and all to many. I can only live life as myself, to have faith and believe. I can only give my soul to myself and let it grow. I only know how to be myself. I can only be me. To thine own self be true. Be true to myself. So that was my inspiration from Whitman. Inspiration from Shakespeare's sonnets. Shakespeare writes with a melody of words almost lyrical. In Old English, his words can still ring true. Shakespeare's sonnets were written between 1595 and 1605. Shakespeare wrote until his death in 1616. That is a legacy that keeps on going for centuries. Magnificent inspiration beyond a classical, tragic poet and storyteller. His plays and sonnets live on through words, readers, and actors living out the words, performing his masterpieces. The arts of words cherished at every instant, being heartful, heartfelt, and heartbreaking. It's a grand story of inspiration, touched by the heart emotions filling the pages. Happiness, tragedy, to thine own self we must be true. Sonnet 10. Make another self for the love of me, that beauty still may still live in thine or thee. So my poem is called Thine Own Self. It's about being true to oneself, dreaming, aspiring, knowing oneself, feeling spreading throughout the heart, embracing love and life, and gather the thoughts of thee and thy, of myself and I. The greatest thought is only replaced by the next one, to feel, to honor, to loyalty. Be free just to be. And there, all there is to be. Look behind, look forward, to grow, to learn, to be. So, I like kind of sharing these stories or these poems because to me it's sharing emotions or thoughts, and they're not like just ideas in your head. They're like feelings deep inside yourself, your whole body, your soul. The next poem is called Reflections. To fill the ideas that swirl in my mind, putting together something to share with all that I can be, with all that I am, to see who I am, the reflections of the mirror, distorted or true. Is what is seen what others see? How can I show myself without sharing all? The privateness of life, lessons learned, the whole world becomes exposed. Can I be private yet known? The words I share, the works I think, become separated. My next one is called To Write. To write, W-R-I-T-E, does not mean to live, to experience, but it allows to learn, to gain experience through learning. Write about what you know, write about what you want to know. Can you imagine the truths of your mind? Free. Feeling free and safe are not feelings I am used to. Life passing fast, yet slowly. Loneliness, desire, looking for something, anything to carry me through. Past haunting, wondering about wrong choices, how to change, how to rely on dreams, wishes, wants, and needs. And there is a poem that I wrote for my gram. And I had presented it to her in a frame, on nice cardstock paper, and put it in a frame. And when I gave it to her and she read it, she almost cried, and she hugged it and said, "I want to be buried with it." Unfortunately, she was cremated, so she wasn't buried with it, but I have the original gift that I had given her, and it's on my wall, and that it makes me remember why I wrote the poem in the first place and what happened when I gave it to my Gram. So, it's called Gram. All my life, you've always been there for me. Whatever life made you encounter, you handled with grace, love, and faith. When I was young, I always knew you were there to support me, to take care of me, teach me, and even dance with me. You are a light in my life, and I cherish and adore you. I love you so much, more than words can say, more than words can fill up my heart. You're more to me than my Gram. You are my friend, my closest friend. I always think of you, and no matter where life takes us, my heart will always hold on to you. I'm sorry. I guess reading that aloud just kind of made me a bit emotional. So I'd like to end that with this. This episode of the podcast, I don't normally do this, but I'd like to dedicate it to the memory of my Gram, Dorothy Shannon. She was born in 1921, and she passed away in 2022 on July 4th. And I also want to dedicate this to my father, who is still around in a new version of himself. And I hope and pray that even though his mind doesn't remember, his heart does. So thank you for being with me. If you're a poet and you want your poems to be featured on Amy's Bookshelf Reviews Poetry Corner, go to the website amysbookshelfreviews.com/podcast for more information. Please feel free to subscribe to my website, where you'll get all the great email campaigns and blog posts about authors, their books, and my recommendation. You might be just as lucky as I am to find that hidden gem that keeps you reading work of your new favorite author. Be well and be safe. Thank you, and I'll talk to you next week. This has been Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast. Thank you for listening. And always, be kind and stay safe. Thank you.